What do you mean? It's beautiful.
Shut up.
That naval one also.
But yeah. So the OV1 actually has a fun story. Last time I was here last year, I was walking around outside like this. It was less snowy and warmer. Good times. I was walking around and there was an OV1 over there in the field on the tarmac over there, and it wasn't part of the museum. I asked about it, they're like, yeah, we don't own that. Some guy bought it and he just never came and picked it up. And then I was looking on the Kalamazoo Air Zoo Facebook page a few months ago. They're like, hey, we've purchased an OV1. And the guy had basically donated it to the museum for a discounted price because he couldn't figure out how to get the OV1 out of here. It's going to cost him too much to ship it. So that's the story of how that OV1 got here. I'm going to go inside here. I'm going to switch over to Wi-Fi. So I might need to disconnect again. Tech, if you're ready.
All right. Let's see if we can get him back in.
There. Could be worse. Could be an OV10 Bronco. Oh yeah, that one is the one you used to laugh about. The Bronco.
Well, I laughed about it mainly because people were suggesting it like in the game as a really, really like it could be a great ground pounder, and this was before like the Phantom existed and stuff, and I just it wouldn't like its design and what it's created for wouldn't really fit in War Thunder that well.
Yeah.
That other plane, I can't. What was that marine plane? That is just so wonky. I can't remember its designation. Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna hear you.
There we go. Yeah, the internet is very spotty in some parts of this museum, so I recommend coming out and visiting it where you don't have internet to deal with. So, one of the first things you see when you come into this building, there's a very famous picture of an A-10 flying back with a severely damaged engine. It had taken a ground fire from I believe it was a surface-to-air missile, and they're going to scrap that engine cowling. I mean, there was nothing left to do with it, but it's from a local National Guard unit. So, National Guard unit donated to the museum here. So you get this A-10 cowling that has been, I would say the word ravaged probably applies here by ground fire. And you can actually get a good look at the inside of it. You can see the internal insulation there. It's a very fascinating piece of A-10 history, in my opinion. You also have a collection of small engines and a few large engines throughout here. I'm not going to spend my time going through all of these, but these are donated from various universities and such. These are your standard, they're called O model engines in the Air Force, but they're opposition motors. So basically this piston goes in while this piston goes out, and it just goes back and forth, and that's how they drive the propellers that would be attached to here. Over here we have another J-58 engine. You can actually get a good look at the size of this compared to, say, a R-3350 off of a B-29. So the B-29's engines compared to what we got with the SR-71. And also compare this to, like an inline Merlin engine or your Ranger 4, basically your Ranger IV engines. I mean, it's just impressively large.
Yeah.
If you come over here, normally you'd be able to get into these. They have training cockpits that you can sit in. This is an F-106. This is an F-16. You'll be able to sit in those and sort of, get a feel for what it's like to be in those cockpits. This is a Wright 1820 off of it was used on like B-17s and B-24 Liberators and such. Here's actually a J-65 Sapphire. This is actually what's used on the B-57. The FJ Fury uses it. The Thunderstreak that we just got in game uses it. So compare this engine here. It's fairly small. Like this is at head level with. If we compare it to this engine over here, it's at least 3 or 4 times the size of anything your average jet-powered aircraft would be using. We also have a here we go. We have a Rolls-Royce Goblin engine, I believe this one is. But this is an early jet engine. Very inefficient because it actually redirects air outwards and then back down along here. So it actually does impact efficiency doing that versus they call it a axial flow engine because it flows along the axes of the jet engine here. So as you can see, this one doesn't redirect the air all around, so it's a lot more efficient. You get a lot more thrust versus this one, which takes this path. These were early engines. It was just a way of getting them to work, but they became outdated very quickly. We also have an F1 engine. This thing's absolutely massive. This is off of the Saturn V. They would have 5 of these firing.
Jeez.
On every Saturn V. You can see those 5 engines right here. And there's the rest of the rocket. If I go under here, you can see it's just absolutely massive. It is the largest rocket engine the U.S. has ever designed. Matched only in size by the shuttle engines, basically. We also have another Redstone engine here. This is an A6 instead of an A5, so it's a little bit later. It uses a different fuel mixture, but it was still used for the Redstone rocket right here. And if anyone plays Kerbal Space Program in the chat, you're going to recognize the next rocket. This is the NERVA rocket engine, which means Nuclear Engine for Rocket Vehicle Applications. So this nozzle would be attached to a nuclear reactor, and they would push liquid hydrogen through that reactor. It would combust it and expand that liquid hydrogen with the heat of the nuclear reactor. And the amount of heat that reactor puts off produces a lot more efficiency than your standard rocket engine just using combustion. So this is basically a nuclear rocket. And it's something born out of, there's something only the 60s and 70s could really create,
Yeah. Yeah, I had the chance to look at some
anyone
of
who plays
these.
Kerbal Space Program is going to recognize that engine. It's pretty famous from that. If we come over here, you can see here's their restoration workshop. They're working on a SDB, I believe it is. Another one that was fished out of the ocean. They've done a lot of work to restore it, and it actually is coming along very well. I'll show you the rest of it over there, but it was in really bad shape the first time I saw it years ago. There's some people standing below the F1 if you want a really good idea of the scale of it all.
Yeah.
It's just a massive engine.
That one was fished out of the ocean, like they just found it there and.
No, sorry, not the ocean. Out of Lake Michigan. Yeah,
Oh
you
well,
missed it
but it's
earlier.
still underwater for decades.
Yeah, yeah.
Jesus.
The Lake Michigan was used for a lot of training, for carrier takeoffs because it's a relatively uh controllable environment, if that makes sense. You know, you're always near land. You can get people help when they need it. But that means a lot of aircraft crash in Lake Michigan. So, for example, here's an SBD that they fished out of Lake Michigan, and they've been restoring that one ever since, as you can see there.
Mm.
And then we have some of the rest of it here. And they would build carriers right here out of cruise ships. They would just cut off the top of the cruise ship and then use it as a training carrier. The danger of that is these training carriers were a lot smaller than real carriers. So you had a lot less room to land in, and you're training pilots to land on it. So you would have a lot of crashes in those situations. Here we have another one of these.
Wait.
What was that?
Oh, he'll be back in 2 minutes. Continue.
All right. Here's another. Here's the J-31 engine. This is one of the first jet engines the U.S. built. You'll find J-31s in the P-59 era Comet. If we look here, it actually sucks air in through here and here. It goes outwards here due to an impeller, back through here, combusts, and then it goes out through here and comes out the back. So this is about as inefficient as a jet engine can get, which is why it was our first jet engine design, and then we abandoned it very quickly. As you can see, it only put out 1,600 pounds of thrust. An equivalent engine this large today would put out probably closer to 5,000 pounds of thrust. So there was definitely a big change. Yeah. Back here we have part of a Sikorsky helicopter. I can't remember which one it was specifically, but you can see the turbofan engines, or the turbo shaft engines right there. It has two of them driving a single propeller up top. We have a replica of a Curtiss early model aircraft from the 1910s. And here we have a Wildcat, or some of one. This is part of an FM2 Wildcat that was fished out of the ocean. Wait, is this the Wildcat or is that the Wildcat? I think this might be the SDB and this might be the Wildcat. That looks a lot more. Yeah, so that's a Wildcat. That's an FM2 Wildcat, and that's an SBD. Both that were fished out of the out of Lake Michigan. If we come over here, we have an F-86. Everyone recognizes the F-86. This one is named Darling Dottie. Has 5 kills on the side here. I don't know if that's an actual paint scheme or if that was the actual plane. I'm thinking it might just be a paint scheme. But this is an F-86F model. This is an F-30 to be exact. So it does have an all-flying tail. It has 650 cals here in the nose. And then we also have the MiG-15 that go over here. The two competitors. You'll see this layout quite often in museums if they have a MiG-15 and an F-86. Because they were
makes
competitors.
sense, right?
Yeah. The MiG-15, obviously, very, very familiar aircraft as well. Sits a lot lower than the F-86, and it's a bit smaller. Has a better thrust-to-weight ratio. But that didn't stop American pilots from doing well, and I think that's just down to training. against the Koreans.
Mm.
Here we have one of my favorite personal amphibious aircraft. This is the Grumman G-73. You can go ahead. I'm streaming for a guy called the European Canadian. We stream museums and we play War Thunder online. But this is the G-73 Mallard. It's a very I don't know. It's one of those planes. Like I say it about everything, but it just looks gorgeous. It looks 30s. It looks
Yeah, that paint
it
job
looks
is really good.
classy. I guess is the best way of putting it. It just has
Has a style
that
on
feel.
it.
Exactly. And there's a lot of Grumman aircraft that look similar to this. But this one is one of the larger ones that can fit more people. And it's amphibious. Not all of them are amphibious. Some of them are only seaworthy. Come back here, you can see the MiG-15's air brakes, as well as the F-86 from the rear. I like that checkerboard pattern on this plane, by the way. I always thought that was a really cool sort of tail decoration. But we come over here, we have a bunch of engines over here. I believe these are all off of B-29s. We also have a 1953 MG, which I think it's a British manufacturer. Don't know off the top of my head. Cars are not my thing. I can appreciate them, but I don't know anything about them. We have a B1 B1 Lancer mock-up. This one actually is an original mock-up built by Rockwell, I believe, for advertising the aircraft, as well as a collection of missiles. We have another one of these standard missile bodies I was talking about, like with the anti-radiation missile, the standard anti-radiation missile, and the I can't remember the other one. I believe this is the Navy one, like we saw earlier, but it was a very common design to be used. We also have these are called recruit engines. These were used to propel as booster stages for larger rockets. I don't know the name of this one off the top of my head, but it was a surface-to-air missile.
So, the Hawk?
No, the Hawks were much smaller.
Okay.
But maybe someone in the chat knows, but I can look it up later. This here actually is this was a large advertisement for a 1950s attraction. They would drive it around and you'd go inside and it tells you all about space and, you could join the Air Force and this could be you. So it's a really interesting piece of history of that sort of era. Just your standard 1950s spaceship looking thing. This tube on the side here, along with this tail here, this is the Redstone rocket. We've seen engines off of it earlier on display. If put together, this would be one of few remaining Redstone rockets. So I hope they do eventually get it restored. The Redstone rocket was a very important part of U.S. Nuclear history as well as space history. Over here we have a T-34 Mentor. This was another trainer aircraft. This one's painted as Navy, but they also used them in the Air Force. This would be your basic trainer. So once you've completed primary trainer school, you'd get in one of these. We have an F-11F Tiger and its famous Blue Angels camouflage. You can see the little down-folded wings there, ready for storage in a carrier. Absolutely gorgeous plane. Just another one of those planes that looks sleek and meant to fly
No, a
fast,
lot of those have the Blue Angels camo on display.
Well, I mean, it's the only thing it's really famous for, so you kind of got to go with it,
Yeah.
I can't think of many F-11Fs that aren't in Blue Angels camo, actually. I can think of maybe one that I've seen.
Oh no, it's that I mean the one from yesterday was also on the Blue
Yeah.
Angels.
We've seen 2 in 2 days.
Yeah.
Over here, we have the always beautiful, the F9F-8 Cougar with its folded wings. It's this one is I think this one might be a training one. It's a 2-person cockpit. Yeah, it's a TF9J actually. So this was post designation changing. But you can see if we come back here, there's that weird engine underneath the tail design that the F9F has, as well as these the swept wings that the F9F-8 and onwards made famous. Just another one of those gorgeous aircraft. This one would carry 420s under the nose. Actually, this one, the training one only had 220s, so you have a 20 here and a 20 here. But the main version would have 220s here and then 220s here as well. I don't know if that was done for weight saving or they just didn't need it. But yeah. Over here, this is always a fascinating aircraft. This is I want to say Cirrus. So this is a Cirrus aircraft VK30, which is a light personal utility aircraft. You can fly you and 3 passengers around. It's got the engine in the back, which is always an interesting design, the pusher design. This one focused on high efficiency. I believe it was so expensive that they didn't end up making a lot of these, but it is a very streamlined and interesting looking aircraft. I always love how sleek the transition from nose to cockpit is. And you
Got
can
an
actually see
interesting front. I'll give it that.
if you're looking at it, actually, you can see there's almost no gap between the cockpit and the fuselage,
Fuselage.
the window. Yeah, so it's a very streamlined aircraft, and that always just looks good. I live by the aircraft design philosophy. If it looks good, it flies good. And that always seems to hold true. We come over here. We have the F-104 Starfighter. Everyone knows the Starfighter. Actually, if you look closely, like I was saying,
I think I recognize the camo that it has. It's the Red Devils. I think it is from War Thunder.
This one I don't. Maybe.
We
I'm
can
not quite
watch
sure.
story later. What were you saying?
But remember how I was telling you how some Air Force aircraft did use the probe and drogue system early on? The F-104 is one of those. So you can see here, here's the probe, and then you'd have a drogue. Actually, this is a good spot to show you. This is what the drogue looks like. So your probe on your aircraft would go into the drogue here, and it would lock in place, and then you would fuel up. Like I said yesterday, the benefits of that is it's very easy for the pilots to hook up and get everything done very quick. It's a lot faster. It's a lot less stress on the refueling aircraft's part, but it has a lower flow fuel rate. So for something like the A3 here, the A3 Sky Warrior, it was a lot trickier because this was a large aircraft and needed a lot of fuel. So it'd be a long time hooked up to that refueling aircraft. This was actually the largest carrier-based aircraft ever designed. Some of this one is missing. This one was actually retired after it crashed, and I talked about it on a previous stream. There was an initiative by A3 veterans to they realized that you can't really fit a full A3 on display in a museum. It's too large. So they instead started an initiative to put cockpits in museums rather than the whole plane. And so that's why we have just the cockpit of the aircraft here. And normally you'd be able to go up inside and look in that, but COVID obviously means that you can't. So is what it is. I've been trying to avoid looking at it for most of the time here. I'm sure people have caught glimpses of it. This is the latest addition to the museum. This is the F-117 Nighthawk, the stealth bomber. As you can see, it's been stripped of its paint. That paint is very toxic when you strip it. Actually, the first one they ever made, they renamed it to Toxic Death when they were stripping the paint to put it in a museum, because they had to wear full body protection. This is the first non-prototype to go to a museum. This one's named Shaba. So it's very cool to see this on display. The other 3 in museums are all prototypes. Normally up there, that's where your infrared camera would be going. And then you would have your pilot up top. You can see everything about this is made to deflect radar angles. It's not meant to reflect anything back straight to the target. You can see even the bomb bay has ridge after ridge after ridge to prevent that radar deflection or reflection. We can look up into the bomb bay. You can fit 2 to 4 bombs up in that bomb bay. There was an article that came out recently saying that it could fit sidewinders. As far as I know, that was not true. The pilot was saying that maybe they experimented with it, but it never actually got the equipment to do that, as far as I understand it.
Someone was asking why did they have to strip the plane?
Why did they have to strip the paint? That paint is top secret classified. The paint is actually designed for stealth. It's actually got iron filings and iron balls ingrained in it when it's put on, with the hopes that it'll absorb radar and reflect radar in various directions. So that paint was designed very specifically, and you'll find this on the F-35 and F-22 as well. Any stealth aircraft on display in the U.S. has its paint stripped, and it's repainted with just a standard gray or black paint, specifically because it's top secret. Everything about this plane, including its paint, was designed for stealth. To be able to get this close to an F-117, you wouldn't have been able to do this 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
yeah, perhaps you have heard the story. Maybe you can, if you know it, you can tell it to the people in the chat. But about the shape of the plane, do you remember when we talked about that once? That it has a particular shape because of the computer that it was developed from, like the way it was
so
developed.
some of the reason, I don't think it's entirely the reason, but one of the reasons that it is shaped like this is it was one of the early aircraft designed by computer. At the time, you could only enter in so many polygons for shape testing. So one of the big reasons that it is shaped like this is because they were limited in how much they could test. So they couldn't test all these round edges for stealth and everything. So at least the rumor I've heard, I'm not 100% sure if it's true, but it does make sense. At least part of the reason it's shaped like this is due to computer limitations at the time. And that's why you see rounder edges on modern stealth aircraft that aren't this.
Please remember, guys, that this plane started development in the 70s, if I remember correctly.
The early 70s, yeah.
Early 70s.
The Wobbly Goblin, which was essentially an F-117 with inward facing tail rather than an outward facing V, had a lot of problems. It actually came about so early that they hadn't really gotten the computer work done for they hadn't really figured out how to get a good enough autopilot system to fly the plane itself, so they actually did crash those Wobbly Goblins due to instability, because it's not shaped to be a plane, it's shaped to be stealth, and then they basically force it into the sky. Is the general idea.